just like anybody else, the youth are looking for a good job, good livelihood for themselves and their families. So it's just about how agriculture can make that possible for them. But that is then for the betterment of the whole society. Doing that has to be understood in terms of public policy, in terms of public investment, as actually for the greater good of the community. And therefore, in NEPAD, in agriculture, we've got very specific interventions that are looking at skills development related to agriculture, both in technologies, technically speaking on the production side, on the agro-industry side, but also in management, in commerce and industry. That is one aspect. The other aspect is the point we made earlier on related to women, is access to resources. What about financing opportunities? What about issues of insurance, issues of access to appropriate inputs and things of that kind? So those are things that we're saying cannot just be out there. There has to be deliberate policy, deliberate decisions that look out for the needs of the youth and actually make that possible. In NEPAD, we're just starting, actually, we'll be launching this evening a program together with FAO, starting in 4 countries, we're going to expand to more countries, especially within the Rural Futures Program of NEPAD, targeting youths on skills development, tagging them with industry, so that they actually have the exposure with industry, have the exposure with the learning that they are doing, and therefore being prepared to actually take up jobs and work in agriculture.
The funding models that would be used, first of all, funding of agriculture within the African context. Yes, Maputo Declaration and the 10%, and that is within the countries. But what kind of funding is required to get this whole project to work? And where are we looking for the funding?
Yeah. In fact, funding space is one area that has changed significantly, radically between today and Malabo. At Malabo time, and going backwards, you could talk about ODA, for instance. You could talk about, and that's why there was emphasis on public financing, which is still important. And we are saying today that public financing is going to be very, very critical. But in a different way, we're talking about how does public financing actually leverage private sector financing? How does public financing open the doors, the gates for increased private sector financing in terms of some of the infrastructure development work? And some of that is happening. It's just that we have not systematically, coherently tagged it in a comprehensive way to rural development, to the appropriate infrastructure we're looking for in terms of agriculture development, in terms of industrialization. I'm talking about roads, I'm talking about energy, I'm talking about ICT, and power as well. So those are things that public financing is going to be critical. But also in that walk the talk aspect, and when you talk about where is the energy for implementation, it's actually private sector. And this has, when we started in 2003, I think there was more talk than work on the issue of private sector. But progressively, we've seen private sector come on board, not just joining to say this is a public sector program, but also embracing it as their own. So we're also saying that apart from implementation capacity, apart from the science and technology that private sector is doing, apart from the training that actually private sector is doing on the flow of business, and even in the partnerships with universities and learning institutions, private sector is also critical in terms of financing. And here actually we have to acknowledge that that includes farmers themselves. Actually farmers already, smallholder farmers, and I want to emphasize that when we're talking about farmers, in fact also recognize that that change we are looking for is majorly going to come from smallholder farming in the rural areas. So the majority of this are actually reinvesting in agriculture. And the potential to increase, to expand that is massive. So we're also looking at domestic financing in that form from private sector itself.